It was a quiet Saturday morning when I received the call. The kind of call that changes everything. My phone buzzed, and I saw the name on the screen. My ex-wife, Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since we finalized the divorce. But there she was, her name lighting up my phone. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello?" "Hey, it's Sarah," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I just wanted to let you know that Emily's wedding is coming up next weekend, and, well, I thought you should be aware." I could feel my heart drop into my stomach. Emily, our daughter, was getting married? The last I heard, she was still in her 20s, focused on her career, and had no real interest in settling down. We hadn't spoken much, but we were still in touch here and there. I had always tried to maintain a relationship with her, even after Sarah and I split. But why hadn't I been told about this? Why hadn't Emily invited me? Wait, what do you mean, let me know? Is this some kind of joke? My voice faltered as I tried to make sense of the situation. "No, it's not a joke," Sarah replied, the edge in her tone making it clear this conversation wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. "You weren't invited, and it's best if you don't show up." There it was, the punch to the gut. I felt as though the ground beneath me was starting to crumble. "What do you mean I'm not invited? She's my daughter, Sarah. I'm her father." I couldn't hide the frustration in my voice now. It was taking everything I had not to shout. "Look," Sarah said, her tone suddenly colder. "It's not personal. Emily doesn't want you there. You've caused enough drama in this family over the years, and she doesn't want to deal with it on her wedding day. I thought you'd understand." My mind was racing. I could feel my blood boiling, but I tried to keep my composure. How could this happen? How could Emily not want me there? Sure, Sarah and I had our issues, but our daughter? I had always been there for her. At least I thought I had. But Sarah, I've been there for her, I said, my voice trembling with emotion now. I've been a part of her life, even if things between us haven't always been perfect. I was at every birthday, every school play. I watched her grow up. I don't understand. Why would she do this? There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again. When she did, her voice sounded as though she was reading from a script, detached and emotionless. "Look, this isn't about you. It's about Emily and her future. She's starting her life with someone new, and she wants to put all the past drama behind her. It's hard for her to have you there knowing how things have been between us. It's better for everyone if you just let it go." Let it go? I couldn't keep the disbelief from seeping into my voice. "This is my daughter's wedding, Sarah. I'm her father. You can't just erase me from this." "I think it's best if you respect her wishes," she said, her tone final. "Goodbye." Before I could respond, the call ended. I stood there, holding the phone in my hand, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. It didn't make sense. How could my daughter, my flesh and blood, exclude me from such a monumental event in her life? I paced around the house, trying to think clearly. Maybe this was just a misunderstanding. Maybe Sarah was exaggerating. I had to talk to Emily. I had to find out what was really going on. But the truth was, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just a simple oversight. This was deliberate. Emily had made a conscious decision to cut me out, and my ex-wife was just the messenger. I couldn't let this go. No matter what had happened in the past, no matter the mistakes I'd made or the arguments Sarah and I had, this was bigger than all of that. This was my daughter's wedding. I grabbed my car keys, walked out the door, and drove straight to Emily's apartment. The drive to Emily's apartment felt like an eternity. My mind replayed the conversation over and over, each replay stabbing deeper than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I navigated through the city streets, every red light feeling like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak swirling together into an unbearable storm. When I reached her building, I parked hastily and rushed inside, taking the stairs two at a time. My legs felt like lead, but the urgency of the situation propelled me forward. My breathing was ragged as I reached her door, my fist hovering over the doorbell. I hesitated for a split second. This wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. I just needed answers. I pressed the doorbell, and after what felt like an eternity, I heard footsteps approaching. The door swung open, and there stood Emily, my daughter, looking more radiant than I ever remembered. She wore a light floral dress, her hair pinned up elegantly, and her eyes met mine with a coldness I wasn't prepared for. "Dad?" Emily said, her tone polite but distant, as if we were acquaintances rather than family. "Emily, we need to talk," I urged, trying to keep my voice steady. "About the wedding." She took a step back, closing the door slightly but not fully. "There's nothing to talk about. I've made my decision." My heart twisted painfully. "Emily, please. I need to know why I wasn't invited. You're my daughter. Nothing should change that." Emily sighed and looked away. "It's complicated. I've told you. I need to move on without revisiting old wounds." "Complicated? You're marrying someone, and that makes it okay to erase me from your life? You owe me more than this." My voice cracked, but I couldn't stop. The mix of frustration and despair overpowered me. Emily's expression hardened. "I know you feel hurt, but this is what I want. You need to respect that." I could see the finality in her eyes. It was a wall, cold, unbreakable, and painful beyond words. I stood there, shaking slightly, trying to find the right words to make her understand. "Emily, I made mistakes. I know I have. But this is unforgivable. I'm your father. I deserve to know what's going on." Emily's silence stretched painfully between us. Finally, she spoke, voice icy. "I can't change your past, Dad, but I've made my choice. Please just let it be." The conversation ended there, with Emily closing the door firmly. I stood in the hallway, stunned. The rejection hit harder than I anticipated, but my resolve only strengthened. I couldn't let her erase me from this part of her life without a fight. As I walked back to my car, a storm of emotions churned inside me. Pain, anger, and a fierce determination. I needed answers. I needed to know what led Emily to this decision, and more importantly, who was behind it. Over the next few days, I tried to contact Emily, but my calls and messages went unanswered. Sarah remained curt and dismissive when I reached out, reinforcing Emily's stance without providing any clarity. It was like hitting a brick wall at every turn. Frustrated but not ready to give up, I started digging. I reached out to mutual friends, people who might have insight into Emily's relationship with her fiancé, Lucas, and the reasons behind her cold dismissal. I discovered that Emily and Lucas had been dating for over a year, something Sarah had conveniently left out during our initial conversation. I also learned that Emily had confided in close friends about her concerns over me showing up unannounced, fearing it would ruin her carefully planned wedding. The idea that I might disrupt her big day, whether true or exaggerated, infuriated me. One evening, after days of relentless searching, I found out where the pre-wedding celebrations were being held. A charming countryside estate, far enough from the city to discourage uninvited guests. The realization only added fuel to my fire. I made up my mind. I would go to that estate. I would confront Emily and Lucas directly. I would make her see the truth that no man, no decision, could sever the bond between a father and his daughter. As the weekend approached, I prepared myself mentally. I knew this would be messy. I knew emotions would run high. But I also knew I couldn't let Emily shut me out without a fight. The day of the wedding dawned with an eerie calm. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the countryside estate where Emily's wedding celebrations were taking place. I left early in the morning, determination pounding in my chest, mingling with a bitter undercurrent of anxiety. The drive to the estate was quiet, save for the hum of the engine and the dull roar of thoughts in my mind. I parked my car a good distance from the estate, unwilling to draw immediate attention. My plan was to approach calmly, to find a way inside without causing a scene, at least initially. As I walked toward the grand estate, I could see the manicured lawns, the lavish floral arrangements, and clusters of elegantly dressed guests mingling and laughing. The air was thick with the scent of roses and fresh-cut grass, mingling oddly with the faint aroma of expensive perfume. My pulse quickened as I moved closer. I spotted Sarah near the entrance, chatting with a group of women in expensive dresses. Her posture perfect, her smile forced but convincing. She looked every bit the orchestrator of this carefully curated event, composed, in control, and utterly ruthless. I approached Sarah, keeping my voice steady. "Sarah." She glanced at me, her smile tightening. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice cold. "I'm here to speak with Emily. It's important." Sarah scoffed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Like I told you before, it's best if you stay away, for her sake and yours." I met her gaze, unwilling to back down. "I have to talk to her. Please, just tell me where I can find her." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "She's busy preparing for the ceremony. If you really care about her, you'll leave." I could see that steel resolve in her expression, but I knew Sarah well enough to suspect there was more to it. Sarah wouldn't admit it openly if there was some shadowy reason behind Emily's decision, some secret I wasn't privy to. My instincts told me to push further, but I decided to bide my time. I thanked her curtly and walked toward the main building, blending in with the crowd as best I could. Inside, the estate was a maze of tastefully decorated rooms and corridors, filled with guests sipping champagne and laughing softly. The atmosphere was suffocating, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I searched for Emily, my heart thundering with each step. Eventually, I spotted her near the main hall. Emily looked resplendent, her wedding gown flowing like liquid silk, intricate lace tracing delicate patterns across her shoulders. Her face was radiant but marked with an unmistakable tension, perhaps from the weight of the day, or maybe something deeper. She stood next to Lucas, her fiancé, who seemed perfectly at ease, chatting and laughing with Emily's friends. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before forcing myself forward. I couldn't let fear or doubt paralyze me now. "Emily," I called, voice steady despite the knots in my stomach. Emily turned, her face paling when our eyes met. For a heartbeat, I thought she might ignore me, but then her jaw clenched, and she stepped toward me, a faint tremble in her hand as she brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Dad?" she said, voice thin, rehearsed. "Emily, please. I need to understand. I need to know why you excluded me. I don't want to fight. I just want the truth." Emily's eyes flashed with something I couldn't immediately identify. Pain? Anger? Something darker? She glanced at Lucas briefly, as if seeking silent approval or reassurance. Lucas stepped in smoothly, his expression unreadable. "Emily's made her decision, and I think it's best we respect that." His tone was polite, but I could detect the underlying warning. "Back off." "Lucas, with all due respect, this isn't just about a decision. It's about my daughter, and I have every right to be here." Lucas's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. "I understand you feel that way, but I think it's best to let Emily handle this." Emily, clearly uncomfortable with the standoff, took Lucas's hand. "Dad, please, I don't want this to ruin today." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying her attempt at composure. I could see the conflict in her eyes, but I refused to let it slip past me. "Emily, whatever you're afraid of, whatever reason you have, I need to know. Please." Emily looked away, biting her lip. For a tense moment, I thought she would break down or finally let me in. Instead, she took a step back, creating distance between us. "I've made my choice. You need to accept it." Her voice was icy, final. I clenched my fists, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it might burst from my chest. "And if I can't? What if I refuse to accept this? I deserve answers, Emily. I deserve to know the truth. Emily's expression hardened, her eyes now distant, resolute. Then, I can't help you. Please, Dad, let it go. Her words hit me like a slap. I could see the pain in her voice, but her stance was immovable. I realized then that I was standing at the edge of an abyss, a chasm carved by years of unresolved conflicts, misunderstandings, and perhaps wounds too deep to mend. Defeated but not yet ready to give up, I turned away, knowing I couldn't force Emily to open up today. But I swore to myself that I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As I retreated from the crowd, I overheard fragments of conversation from guests, whispers about Lucas's past, rumors of deceit, betrayal, and worse. It was hard to believe, but I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a shred of truth to those rumors, I knew I had to find out. As the evening wore on and the wedding ceremony drew nearer, I sat on the estate's terrace, my mind racing with possibilities. Had Emily been manipulated? Was Lucas not the man he appeared to be? The weight of unanswered questions hung heavy in the air as the distant strains of wedding music played. One thing was certain. I wasn't walking away from this. Not without the truth. As twilight descended over the estate, casting long shadows across the manicured gardens, I sat in silent frustration. The laughter from the wedding festivities felt like salt in my wounds. Joy I wasn't allowed to partake in. Happiness I was being deliberately excluded from. The distant clink of champagne glasses and soft hum of music grated against my nerves, but I couldn't afford to let emotion cloud my judgment. I needed answers. Determined, I stood and made my way back toward the main hall, blending once again into the sea of guests. My plan was simple. I had to get closer to Lucas, to learn the truth about the man Emily had chosen. The rumors I overheard earlier gnawed at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas's calm, collected exterior masked something darker. Scanning the crowd, I spotted Lucas by the bar, chatting effortlessly with Emily's friends. He looked every bit the perfect groom, confident, charming, and utterly convincing. I clenched my jaw and approached. "Lucas," I called, my voice firm. Lucas turned smoothly, flashing a polished smile. "Good evening. You must be Emily's father." His tone was cordial, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. Something icy. "Yes, I need to speak with you privately," I said, cutting through the pleasantries. Lucas studied me for a heartbeat, then inclined his head. "Of course. Shall we step outside?" We moved away from the crowd, the din of celebration fading behind us. Outside, the cool air felt like a reprieve, but my nerves were frayed, on edge. Lucas led me to a quieter section of the estate's gardens. The manicured hedges and flickering lanterns cast long, dancing shadows, creating an almost surreal backdrop for the confrontation I knew was inevitable. "So," I started, voice steady but edged with tension. "I've heard things about you, Lucas. Rumors. I need to know the truth." Lucas's eyes flickered briefly, a micro-expression so quick I almost missed it. He masked it expertly with a casual shrug. "Rumors tend to be exaggerated. I assure you, I have Emily's best interests at heart." I leaned in, voice low. "Cut the act. I've heard enough to be concerned. My daughter's happiness matters to me, and I intend to make sure she's not walking into something dangerous." Lucas's posture remained composed, but I detected a slight tightening around his jaw. "I understand your concern. It's natural for a father to be protective. But I've known Emily for over a year, and I love her. I would never hurt her." His words were smooth, rehearsed, too perfect. My gut told me otherwise. "Lucas, I'm not here to be polite. If there's anything at all, I need you to be honest with me, for Emily's sake." Lucas's eyes met mine, cold and unwavering. "I have nothing to hide. You have my word." I wanted to believe him, but years of experience had taught me to trust instincts over words. I hope your actions match your words. Emily deserves the truth. Lucas nodded, dismissing my doubts with an air of practiced sincerity. Agreed. The conversation ended there, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As I walked back toward the main hall, I noticed a staff member, a young man with a clipboard, hovering near a service entrance. I approached, feigning casual curiosity. "Excuse me, I'm trying to find a quiet place. Any recommendations?" The staff member glanced at me, eyes wary. "There's a terrace near the east wing. It's quieter, with a good view of the gardens." I thanked him and made my way there, hoping to gather my thoughts and plan my next move. As I sat on the terrace, I couldn't help replaying Lucas's demeanor. The polished smile, the unwavering confidence, and that split-second flicker of tension when I pressed him about the rumors. Something was off. Lost in thought, I nearly missed the quiet footsteps approaching. I looked up and saw Emily herself, her face drawn and pale, a stark contrast to her earlier radiance. Her wedding makeup couldn't mask the tension etched into her features. "Dad," Emily said softly, sitting beside me without preamble. I took a moment to collect myself before replying. "Emily, I know you want me to let this go, but I can't. I need to know the truth about Lucas. Please, I'm asking you as your father." Emily hesitated, eyes downcast. After a long silence, she finally spoke, voice trembling. "Lucas, he's not who he says he is." My heart stopped. "What do you mean? What haven't you told me?" Emily looked me in the eyes, and for the first time in hours, I saw a glimmer of vulnerability. He's been hiding things I only recently discovered. I didn't want to burden you. I wanted to handle it myself." "Emily, you should have told me." My voice was thick with emotion. I thought I could manage it, but now... Her voice faltered. "I don't know what to believe anymore." The weight of her words pressed down on me. My worst fears were materializing before my eyes. "Emily, whatever it is, we'll face it together. I promise you that." Emily nodded slowly, but her eyes remained clouded with uncertainty and fear. Just then, the distant sound of raised voices carried over from the main hall. My instincts screamed that trouble was brewing. I glanced at Emily, whose face had paled even further. "Emily, stay close to me. If Lucas is hiding something, we'll find out what it is, before it's too late." She looked at me, tears welling up. "I'm scared, Dad. I just want today to be perfect." I squeezed her hand tightly, my resolve hardening. "I'll protect you no matter what." As we sat there, the distant clamor of the wedding continued, oblivious to the storm gathering at its heart. The wedding ceremony was in full swing when Emily and I returned to the main hall. Guests chatted animatedly. Glasses clinked in celebration, and the atmosphere shimmered with the illusion of joy. Emily clung to my side, her hand trembling in mine, but I could tell she was trying to keep up appearances for the sake of the day. As the ceremony commenced, I couldn't shake the gnawing sense of dread in my gut. Lucas's perfectly crafted facade haunted me. His polished words, his unnervingly calm demeanor, the split-second flicker of tension when I confronted him earlier. There was more to Lucas than Emily knew, and I was determined to uncover it. After the ceremony, the reception unfolded with extravagant pomp. The guests mingled under twinkling fairy lights, laughter and music filling the air. Emily smiled through the evening, but I could see the cracks beneath her composed exterior. As the evening wore on, I noticed Lucas slipping away from the crowd at intervals. He would disappear into the estate's quieter corners, engaging in hushed phone calls or intense conversations with unidentified individuals. My suspicion deepened. I needed to know where he went and who he met. I decided to follow him discreetly. At one point, Lucas excused himself from the reception area and disappeared toward the east wing, the same direction the staff had earlier directed me to the terrace. I trailed him from a distance, careful not to draw attention. Lucas moved with calculated precision, slipping through service corridors and staff-only areas. Eventually, he reached a small, secluded patio on the estate's perimeter. I waited until he was out of sight, heart pounding as I crept closer. From my vantage point, hidden behind a cluster of hedges, I observed Lucas talking on his phone, voice low and tense. Yes, everything is proceeding as planned. The target remains unaware. No issues so far. The word sent a chill down my spine. Target? My pulse quickened. What was Lucas involved in? I strained to catch more of the conversation, but the static and distance muddled the details. After a few more minutes, Lucas ended the call and rejoined the reception, slipping back into his role as the charming, composed groom. I returned to Emily's side, my mind racing. Lucas was hiding something dangerous. Of that, I was certain. But I had no proof, no details. I would have to find another way to uncover the truth. As the night wore on, the celebrations reached their peak. Guests danced, clinked glasses, and toasted the happy couple. Emily's smile lit up the room, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside her. I admired her strength, but worried about the price she was paying to maintain the facade. At some point, Emily slipped away from the crowd, retreating to the terrace for a brief respite. I followed her, staying close but not crowding her space. On the terrace, Emily stood silently, gazing out over the estate's expansive gardens, lost in thought. I joined her, placing a steadying hand on her back. Emily, you can tell me anything. I need to know the truth about Lucas. Everything you know. Emily's voice trembled as she spoke. There are things I've discovered. Things I wish I hadn't seen. She paused, voice barely above a whisper. Lucas isn't who he claims to be. I've seen documents, heard rumors, whispers about illegal dealings, financial fraud, even worse. My blood ran cold. The rumors I'd heard earlier suddenly made sense. Lucas had lied to me, lied to Emily and everyone here. Did you confront him? I asked, my voice tight with urgency. Emily shook her head. I was scared. I wanted to believe he loved me, that the rumors were false. But after what I overheard tonight, I can't ignore it anymore. Her confession ignited a fire in me. Emily, we need to find out the truth. I won't let him hurt you, emotionally or otherwise. Emily looked at me, eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. I don't know if I can handle this, Dad. I just want today to be perfect. I don't want to ruin it with all this. I squeezed her hand reassuringly. You're stronger than you think. We'll face this, together. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave or retire to the estate's guest accommodations, I resolved to investigate Lucas's past more thoroughly. There was no time to waste. The next morning, while Emily rested after the whirlwind of emotions and events, I arranged to meet with a private investigator I'd worked with years ago. His name was Daniel Marks, a seasoned professional with a reputation for uncovering the truth, no matter how deeply buried. By midday, Daniel agreed to take the case. I relayed everything I knew. Lucas's demeanor, the rumors, the cryptic phone call, and Emily's revelations. Daniel assured me he'd uncover the truth swiftly. As the investigation kicked into high gear, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Emily, though the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Emily, for her part, seemed torn between her desire for a perfect wedding day and the gnawing doubts Lucas had planted in her mind. Later that afternoon, Daniel called with a breakthrough. His investigation had revealed that Lucas, whose real name was not Lucas Hartman but Mark Livingston, had a murky past involving several aliases and connections to criminal enterprises, including money laundering and fraud. Daniel had also traced Mark's recent movements, confirming that the phone call I overheard was part of ongoing criminal activities. My worst fears were confirmed. Emily had unknowingly been drawn into a dangerous web, and the wedding was a carefully orchestrated distraction from the dark truth lurking beneath the surface. That evening, I confronted Emily with the evidence. Tears welled in her eyes, but I could see the steel beneath her vulnerability. I should have told you sooner, Dad. I wanted to protect you. Protect myself. I embraced her tightly. You've done nothing wrong, Emily. I'll protect you from this, no matter what it takes. As the night deepened and the estate's lights twinkled like stars, I knew the battle ahead would be brutal. Lucas, Mark Livingston, had woven a dangerous web, and we were caught in its center. The revelations about Lucas, Mark Livingston, hit me like a freight train. The weight of knowing the man Emily planned to marry was entangled in criminal activities made every fiber of my being ache with dread. But I had to remain composed. Panic wouldn't protect Emily. Only action would. That night, after the guests had retired and the estate quieted down, I sat with Emily in the privacy of her suite. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies, mingling oddly with the faint trace of expensive cologne. Mark's scent lingering stubbornly. Emily, I began, voice steady but resolute. You need to postpone the wedding. We need time. Time to uncover the full extent of what Mark is involved in. Emily looked at me, her eyes glassy but determined. I can't, Dad. The arrangements are set, the guests, everything. Her voice quivered, betraying the tremor in her resolve. Emily, your safety isn't something I'm willing to gamble with. Please trust me on this. She hesitated, glancing at the framed photos on the bedside table. Images of her and Mark, smiling and blissfully unaware of the truth. Finally, after a long pause, Emily nodded. Okay, I'll postpone, but we need answers. Over the next 48 hours, Daniel delved deeper into Mark Livingston's past. His criminal record, hidden under layers of forged identities, painted a picture of a man involved in large-scale money laundering operations and fraud schemes stretching across several states. The deeper Daniel dug, the clearer it became. Mark Livingston was not just a fraudster. He was part of a larger criminal network, with tentacles stretching into legitimate business and politics. Meanwhile, I took it upon myself to confront Mark directly. I couldn't let Emily suffer under the shadow of uncertainty any longer. Late the next evening, under the guise of a casual evening stroll, I found Mark near the estate's private lounge area. The dim lighting and sparse guests created an opportunity for confrontation. Mark sat alone, nursing a glass of aged whiskey, the ice clinking softly as he swirled the amber liquid. His posture was relaxed, but I could see the tension in the slight twitch of his hand. I approached steadily, forcing my voice to remain calm. Lucas, we need to talk. Mark looked up, eyes gleaming with that unnerving mix of charm and cold calculation. Of course. What's on your mind? His tone was disarmingly casual. Cut the act, Mark. Or Lucas, or whatever your real name is. I know who you are and what you're involved in. I know about the money laundering, the fraud, and your criminal network. Mark's expression didn't flinch, but I caught the almost imperceptible clench of his jaw. That's quite the accusation. And if it's true, then you walk away from Emily and I walk away. You endanger her, and I'll make sure the authorities know every detail of your operation. My voice was unwavering, laced with the steel of my resolve. Mark studied me, silence stretching between us like taut wire. After a long moment, he leaned back, arms crossed. You're serious. Dead serious. I won't let you harm her, emotionally, physically, or otherwise. Mark chuckled darkly, the sound low and unsettling. You're a determined man. I admire that. But you're playing a dangerous game. I'm not bluffing. Emily's off limits. Mark stared at me for another agonizing minute, then leaned forward, voice quieter but sharp. Fine, I'll respect your wishes, for now. But you should be careful. You're poking at a nest of vipers. I nodded, unwilling to give any sign of weakness. I'm already in the middle of it. You can't scare me off. Mark drained his glass, stood, and offered me a thin, mocking smile. We'll see how long your resolve lasts. With that, he walked away, leaving me to wrestle with a mix of dread and determination. That night, as I replayed the confrontation in my mind, I worried about Emily. Mark's warning echoed ominously in my thoughts. If Mark truly was as dangerous as Daniel's findings suggested, Emily could be in immediate peril. The following day, Daniel discovered something more alarming. Mark had several offshore accounts, funneled through legitimate business fronts. The transactions hinted at far more than just fraud. It suggested Mark was laundering money for a dangerous cartel with ties to organized crime. As Daniel relayed this information, I felt the walls closing in. The situation was more perilous than I had feared. Emily's wedding wasn't just a facade for love. It was a smokescreen for Mark's criminal dealings. Determined to confront Emily with the full truth, I sat her down that evening. Emily, I've uncovered more. Mark isn't just hiding fraud. He's laundering money for a cartel. If you marry him, you could become a target. Emily was visibly shaken, trembling as she processed the information. I had no idea. I thought the rumors were just exaggerations. You didn't know, and that's not your fault. But now you do, and we need to decide the next steps carefully. I won't let you go through with this wedding. Emily nodded, voice fragile but resolute. I trust you, Dad. I want to cancel it. I want to be safe. Relieved by her decision but aware that the danger had escalated, I planned the next move. Daniel and I would gather concrete evidence on Mark's network and bring it to the authorities. However, as I laid out this plan, I couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of urgency. Time was running out. Mark knew I was probing, and if he felt threatened, Emily and I would be in his crosshairs. That night, I decided to keep a close watch on Emily, ensuring her safety while Daniel worked tirelessly to expose Mark's criminal web. But as the clock ticked closer to the time when Emily would have been wed, I sensed the noose tightening. The cartel wouldn't take kindly to interference. We were already deep in a dangerous game, one with stakes higher than I could have imagined. The following days felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm of uncertainty. Emily clung to me, her fragile resolve wavering between fear and determination. Mark, Lucas, was still present at the estate, maintaining the charade of the perfect fiancé. His smiles remained polished, his demeanor impeccably composed, but I could sense the undercurrent of menace that never fully dissipated. Daniel worked tirelessly, tracking Mark's communications, financial trails, and connections. Every piece of evidence painted a darker picture. Mark wasn't just laundering money. He was deeply entwined with the cartel, acting as a key intermediary between the criminal network and legitimate business fronts. The stakes had escalated beyond fraud. Mark was a pivotal player in a sprawling criminal empire. With the evidence mounting, I knew we couldn't wait. We had to confront Mark and expose him before Emily's safety was compromised further. Late one evening, under the guise of finalizing wedding arrangements, I requested a private meeting with Mark in the estate's library, a secluded room with thick walls and heavy wooden doors, offering some measure of privacy and control. Mark arrived promptly, looking as polished as ever, though I could see the faint traces of unease in his eyes. He extended a hand, which I did not shake. Let's be direct, Mark. I know about your cartel connections, the laundering operations, and the network you've embedded yourself in. This charade ends tonight. Mark's smile was tight, thin, and brittle. I'm impressed by your tenacity, but you must understand, I'm doing this for Emily's future. I love her, and I want to build a legitimate life with her. His words were venomous in their deceit. I met his gaze without flinching. Save the lies. I have the evidence, and the authorities will be informed by tomorrow. If you care for Emily at all, you'll leave. immediately and permanently. Mark's demeanor shifted subtly. His posture straightened, and his eyes darkened. You're making a mistake. My world. It's dangerous. If you proceed with this, Emily and everyone you care about will be caught in the crossfire. A thin thread of panic laced through his calm tone, but I held my ground. I'll take my chances. Emily's life is worth any risk. Mark stared at me for several intense moments before nodding slowly. Very well. You've been warned. Mark left the library, and I knew we were at a critical juncture. We had the evidence, but the cartel's shadow loomed large. I instructed Daniel to hand over all findings to federal authorities at first light, while I redoubled my efforts to ensure Emily's safety. The night dragged on with an oppressive tension, but nothing immediate occurred. Mark kept up appearances, mingling at the reception, speaking with guests, and maintaining the illusion of the devoted fiancé. But as the clock struck midnight, a storm descended, both literal and metaphorical. Heavy rain battered the estate as thunder cracked overhead. The reception had ended, and most guests had left or retired to their rooms. Emily and I sat in her suite, clutching each other tightly. I reassured her repeatedly that we would get through this. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently. It was Daniel. They're moving. The cartel's making a play. Mark's been in contact with his network, and they're targeting the estate, specifically Emily. My heart lurched. The calm before the storm was over. I relayed the message to Emily, who clung to me, trembling. I contacted the authorities, who assured me they were dispatching agents immediately, but their estimated arrival time was over an hour. We couldn't wait. The estate was too isolated, and Mark's network wouldn't hesitate. I organized a plan. Emily would be discreetly evacuated through a staff-only exit I had scoped out earlier, with me escorting her personally. Daniel and I coordinated with trusted staff members, ensuring the escape route was clear. As Emily prepared, I took one last glance toward the reception area where Mark was still socializing. My gut told me we were running out of time. The escape was tense but successful. Emily and I slipped away under the cover of darkness, rain soaking through our clothes, hearts hammering in our chests. Safely inside a secured location, Emily wept, relief, terror, and heartbreak all mingling in her sobs. I held her, whispering reassurances I wasn't sure I believed myself. The next day, authorities raided the estate, arresting Mark and several associates. The evidence Daniel gathered was more than sufficient for a conviction. Mark's arrest sent shockwaves through the criminal network, but the cartel's threat didn't dissipate overnight. The cartel was a ruthless entity, and Mark's betrayal of their trust would have consequences. In the weeks that followed, Emily and I navigated the aftermath. Mark, exposed and incarcerated, maintained his silence, offering no confession or remorse. The cartel's immediate threat subsided, though I knew it wouldn't be eliminated entirely. Emily struggled with the betrayal and the emotional wreckage it left. Therapy helped her gradually rebuild her sense of safety and trust. The wedding was indefinitely postponed, replaced by Emily's slow, steady recovery. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the terrace, the very place where she first confided in me, I asked her the question I feared the most. Emily, despite everything, can you ever forgive Mark? She paused, staring at the horizon where the sun dipped below the estate's distant hills. Finally, she answered, I don't know, Dad. Part of me wants to forget he ever existed. Another part wonders what could have been if the truth had come earlier. But I know one thing. I won't let this define me. I'll move on, stronger. Her words were a bittersweet balm to my frayed heart. As the estate settled back into a fragile peace, I couldn't help but reflect on the terrifying truth. Love can blind us, even in the face of darkness. Emily had nearly been consumed by it, but we had fought back. The shadows might never fully fade, but we would navigate them, together. Do you believe Emily made the right decision in postponing the wedding despite the emotional toll it took? Could I have handled the situation with Mark differently? If so, how? How do you think the cartel's threat will evolve, and what would you do in our situation? Do you think Emily will fully recover from the betrayal, or will the past always haunt her?